Sawadee good morning everyone. I'm Honey Cholapansa Darula, welcoming our audience joining us both on Zoom and Facebook Live to our webinar series today, and that's titled Germaphobic is a New Normal, Reorienting Your Hotel Business to Gain Trust from Health Concerning Clients. This is a webinar series for incentive travel brought to you by Site Thailand in association with TICA and supported by TCEP. So every other Friday, we bring you an in-depth discussion revolving around post-COVID-19 incentive travel. Today's topic, ladies and gentlemen, is rather interesting as we take a look on how the hotel industry, which is getting back to business after a hiatus in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, is ready to reconnect and restore confidence among health-conscious clients and encourage everyone to travel again. Before all that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the Vice President, Events and Education of Site Thailand Chapter, Mr. Ravi Gandlani, to deliver a few words of welcome. Mr. Ravi.
Hi, and a very good morning to everyone. On behalf of Site Thailand, I would like to welcome you to our third Site Talk. My name is Ravi, and I'm the Vice President of Events and Education for Site Thailand. In this third edition of Site Talk, the topic is Germaphobia is a new normal. This was one of the popular topics in the survey that we had conducted earlier on. I believe in today's world, what we call the new normal is measurements that we have in place. Like, for example, we are all used to wearing face masks, having our temperatures checked whenever we go in and out of a place, have to scan QR codes when we enter malls or establishments, and washing your hands on a regular basis. But what we have to realize is sometimes this is not enough. And as a person in the hospitality industry, what we get first question from the clients nowadays is, what measurements do you have in place? What are you doing to gain trust? And what are you measurements that you have put in place to make sure that our guests feel safe and trust the hotel? So that's why we have three wonderful panelists joining us today, and I would like to thank them for being with us today. Before we start, I would also like to thank our strategic partner, TCEP, who are a big supporter for Site Thailand on many of the activities. Another partner that we work with a lot for Site Thailand is TICA, who support us on the activities that we do as well. So a big thank you to both of you. Site Thailand also has 2 more talks coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that as well. Without further ado, I would like to pass it back to Kunhani so she can start the session. I hope you enjoy and have a great Friday as well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Ravi. And as you all are aware, we have 3 panelists joining us this morning who will be sharing their valuable insights with you. Our first speaker is a seasoned hotelier with over 20 years of experience in Asia Pacific. He is currently the Cluster General Manager of Novotel Bangkok Sukhumvit 20 and Ibis Styles Bangkok Silom, and also Area General Manager Thailand for Mid-Scale and Economy Hotels with Accor Thailand, Mr. Benjamin Craig. Good morning.
Good morning.
And our next speaker is a visionary leader from Australia's business events industry, Mr. Andrew Hebo, Chief Executive Officer or CEO of the Association of Australian Convention Bureau. Good morning. And our third speaker is a celebrated event planner known for creating unforgettable experiences for clients, Mr. Richard Su, Chief Guru at Creative Marketing, Meeting and Exhibition Planners of Singapore. Morning.
Morning, everybody. Sawadee.
Sawadee ka. Thank you very much for joining us. In today's webinar, aside from the conversation with experts, there are a couple of polls. We like you to share your opinions with us. So I'll let you know when the polls are coming up. But what you need to do is click on the poll menu at the bottom of the screen. It's at the bottom of the screen, and you can vote to choose your answer. We'll tell you the results of the polls as well. Also, we have Q&A coming up later after the discussion is over. So do feel free to post your questions anytime at the Q&A box. The Q&A box is also there at the bottom of the screen on the menu bar. Okay, so I guess we are ready. Let's begin with a warm-up poll, shall we? The first question: will your decision to attend an event be determined by the hygiene SOPs or standard operation procedures put in place by the venue? Once again, this is a question. Will your decision to attend an event be determined by the hygiene SOPs put in place by the venue? So it's a yes or no answer. Please do vote. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask the opinions of our speakers on this question. What if there were declines? So gentlemen, can you briefly share your thoughts on this very first warm-up poll? Let me begin with Kun Richard.
Yes and no. Yes, because it's a prerequisite, I think, for any establishment to have safety procedures in place. But no, because I would be looking for more the reason for attending the event as well. So two things.
All right. And Andrew.
Look, I think this is an absolutely great question to start. And I know we'll talk about a little bit more further down the track, but I really think it's important to think about the client and being in the client's shoes and what their thinking process will be. From a supply chain perspective, hotels and venues, there is only so much of the environment that we can control. And I think that involves those COVID safe hygiene practices. But there are some other risks that I think a client is exposed to that we'll be exploring over the course of our economies opening up again. So that question really sort of sparks that conversation maybe a bit later in the webinar.
Kun Benjamin.
Yeah, good morning. I think similar to the other panelists, the standard operating procedures are really, really important, but they're not the only single piece of information that clients will take. And I know when we've gone through our recent initiatives towards SHA certification at my hotel and the Accor All Safe program, we know that a lot of the standard operating procedures we were doing in international hotels are already in place. We've just elevated them and implemented them in a slightly different way. So I think they're important, but not the only point.
Okay, let's have a look at what the audience think as per this question. Let me just have a quick look. Is it a yes? Oh, it's 96% of the audience answering yes to this question. Okay, so that was a nice warm-up. How about another poll before the discussion begins? So here's a question. What's the greatest challenge in reconnecting with the business events market? What's the greatest challenge in reconnecting with the business events market? Communication with your clients? Is that the one? Communicating your readiness to the market? Finding extra resources to meet the new normal standard? Reskilling the team to be compatible with the new normal? Or convincing clients to travel to create events again? So do pick your choice, pick your answers, and actually one answer that is, will come to the results in a short while. All right, so here we go with the discussions beginning right now. Hotels, just like any business establishment around the world, are implementing the many measures and procedures to restore customers' confidence while at the premises, like Benjamin did mention a little while ago. So wherever you go, you'll see the cleaning team stepping up, working harder to ensure that the place is germs-free and that it's also safe. But these efforts will need plenty of resources. It's more cost, manpower, more training, and the capacity of the event venues and hotels have been reduced significantly as well. And that translates, I believe, into higher expenses with lower income. And that could be a perfect nightmare for some hotel and venue businesses. So amidst the uncertainty of the coronavirus pandemic, what's the current situation when it comes to the hotels and venue businesses? And how can business sustain in this challenging time? Let me begin by asking Kun Benjamin.
Thank you, Kunhani. Look, I think there's always a delicate balance between managing the requirement for additional resources or additional services and facilities, and this is not unlike that. However, we are definitely operating in a situation with reduced meetings and events revenue in the short to medium term. So there are some areas that we need to focus on. But again, linking back to what I mentioned earlier, in our hotel and across a lot of our properties, we've always had a lot of these important systems, cleanliness, hygiene, standards and operating procedures in place. So what we're seeing is we're changing the way that we're doing some things and definitely elevating some areas with an increased focus, because we do need to, I suppose, overtly make all of our customers aware of things like cleaning, hygiene, and the protocols around checking in and checking out of venues. But I think overall it can be managed. Definitely the short to medium term will be the biggest challenge as the business starts ramping up. My hotel, Novotel Bangkok Sukhumvit 20, has been lucky as one of the fortunate properties it has maintained and operated throughout the entire duration of this pandemic. However, from that, we are already seeing some early indications of business coming back, definitely, of course, from the domestic segment. So we welcome it.
Okay. And Mr. Andrew, how can we make this work for, the hotel and the venue business? What's the challenge that you see?
Look, it's a big question being asked here in Australia, is whose responsibility and who foots the bill. I think it's a very important one. I hate to sound like Switzerland on this, but I do think there's a shared responsibility here. I think at the end of the day, while the venues need to manage greater COVID safe procedures and responsibilities, and there is potentially the need of bringing in additional equipment, we have to understand, after enduring periods of simply not being open and not earning any revenue, that's just not a cost that the venues can 100% bear. So I think in the short term, clients will need to face the fact that in the short to medium term, business events will be slightly more expensive, in my view, to run, and that's also to provide that safety and security for their attendees, which they're responsible for. So just like any other costs that a venue would bear, some of that will need to be passed on to the client in the short to medium term. Look, being a little bit biased as well, I also think working with your bureau is quite important. The bureaus have a long pipeline of business, and that's one of the good things about the business events industry, as well as one of the things that goes against us. I think looking forward, we need our governments to give us some surety around and understanding that you can't just open business tomorrow and business events will occur the day after. We need a lead time so that these events can be managed and planned for. And in Australia's circumstance, we've got our next big period coming up or approaching in September through to November. So if the government here in Australia doesn't give us that lead time, we'll miss that last period of peak business before the end of the year. And then there'll be more of a reliance on government to subsidise the industry, which is not a good outcome from them either. And look, my final point is always make decisions on evidence. I'm a little bit of have become a little bit of a data nerd and research nerd. And there's a lot of information everywhere. From a global perspective, I mean, Site is looking at a lot of client sentiment, behaviour as well as from an association's perspective. You can go to ICA or your other national bodies that are doing research at the moment. We're doing a few little studies and surveys of the corporate sector here in Australia and some from the association sector as well. We're finding the response is quite different from both markets. So I always definitely go back to evidence and research and base your decisions there.
I see. Richard, what are your thoughts, and what will be the ideal spot at the moment to meet buyers' expectations?
I think we have to look at all these new procedures and process as a must-have, but we do not have to look at it as an expenditure alone, but as an investment in terms of how it can boost end-user confidence in your product and services, which then turn into a brand-building exercise. So it's not a question of how hospitality business can sustain this additional expenditure, but more on how to maximize returns on this investment. And this returns itself can sustain that expenditure. To me, that is the ideal spot where you use whatever you're doing to market your product so that it builds back and it maximizes your return on marketing investment. Yeah.
I see. Now, let me get back to Kun Benjamin. Cleanliness. So we're talking about germophobia, which is a new normal. But cleanliness, as we all know, is nothing new for the hotel business, but it's just that the clients are being extra super sensitive to hygiene right now. How strictly are COVID safety measures for business events applied at your hotels at the Echo Group in a time when germophobia, like I mentioned, is something which has become a new normal?
Yeah, look, thank you, Kunhani. At our hotel, so we're part of the Accor Group, and we've recently released information about our global program, which is called Accor All Safe. My property's gone through the internal certification process, and we've currently completed that. As we were operating, we did fast track and make sure we're doing that. With relation to how strict it is, as we've seen this situation unfold over the last few months, we've been constantly evolving what we've been doing at a hotel level. So we do already have a very high level of hygiene. We've been HACCP certified from a food and hygiene standard perspective for quite some time. But what we have seen is, and somebody brought up a really good point, previously, a lot of cleanliness has been done in the background. It might have been done in night shift or done when guests weren't present. We've almost flipped that completely around, and you need to have a real overt feeling and give the guests the satisfaction that the cleanliness and hygiene is happening. There's a combination of things like seals and cleanliness, but a large amount of that is the visuals of how we're actually managing that. There's a lot of additional signage that's going to go up. But overall, the process, and with the Accor All Safe program, it is really, really important to make sure that all of our customers and clients are feeling satisfied from the point that they arrive at the hotel until their departure point. And with conferencing events, as they start to ramp up and scale up, and the restrictions are eased in all of the countries, it's really important that when you're welcoming large groups of people, 10, 20, my conference facilities can take up to 1,000 people, we need to make sure we've got all the systems and structures up in place to give them the levels of reassurance. And with the All Safe program, we also have a third-party certification process. So not only do we independently are awarded that certification, but then very shortly we'll get a third-party official certification, which also validates that, no differently to us and with our HACCP compliance and requirements.
So you're very ready to welcome back the business events to your hotels.
Yeah, definitely. But there are a lot more changes that do need to continue to be made. And I don't think it's going to stop now. I think there will be an evolution process with this, and it will continue to change. Some things might naturally fall away, and then other elements might be added up.
Okay. Andrew, you're also the coordinator of Safety and Hygiene Subcommittee. So what are the set of guidelines adapted and used in Australia right now that might be helpful for other countries to learn from?
Yeah, it's a really interesting scenario here in Australia, and I guess if I can paint a picture, probably tomorrow actually marks 3 months since the business events industry was shut down by the Australian government. But I guess we've got two levels working within Australia at this point in time. We've got the federal government, and we've also got state governments, and so collectively the business events industry has come together under the Business Events Council of Australia, peak body, and that organisation represents the convention centres, it represents the associations, PCOs, the exhibition sector, and the training component of the business events industry here in Australia. And our main target is the federal government. And so what the Australian government did was create a national cabinet where they make decisions around how to shut down or open up the economy based on advice from the chief medical officers. So together we're still in the planning phase, but we've provided a very high set of principles that would essentially form the framework of COVID safe guidelines at a lower level, either within different states or within venues and hotels as well. And so while we're trying to advocate to the federal government to allow the economy to open up, the decisions being made around opening the economy are being done at a state level, which does make it quite confusing, but it's all based on the amount of risk within the large country of Australia and the population spread, and some parts of Australia have been hit harder than others. So we're seeing at the moment different states opening up at different speeds and allowing events of different sizes, even with some state borders still being closed at this point in time. So it's a little bit of a complex system. We would much have preferred the opening of the economy to happen at the same speed as the close down, all at the same time and same level. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So those guidelines that we've prepared, they're available on our Business Events Council.org.au site, and anyone can go and have a look at those high-level principles. But we're putting those forward as an opportunity for the Australian business event sector to leverage off and promote best practice.
Richard, what's the case in Singapore?
Sorry?
What's the case in Singapore?
I'm actually from Malaysia.
Oh, sorry. Malaysia.
Yeah, but that's okay. I can relate to you about what's happening in Malaysia. I'm part of the Business Events Council in Malaysia as well. And just as Andrew is doing, we are actually speaking with the government on the SOPs that needs to be in place for events to start happening. And I think we can reach a decision hopefully by next week. But what we are looking at is really looking at a minimum size of group that with minimum risk exposure. And I think that's really important. But on the event side, as an event organizer, I think what's really important is to humanize that experience instead of just having a straight SOP, because it's very clinical and very cold. So as an event organizer, I will do that part, but I will also help with the SOPs to make sure that the risk of transmission is lower.
Okay. All right. Before we move on, let's take a quick check at the results of our second poll. Let me see. And the results of the poll to the question, what's the greatest challenge in reconnecting with business events market? Most of our audience chose the last choice, which is convince the client to travel or create events again. And that was about 57% from the respondents, from the audience. Okay, so let's get into the client's shoes now. I'd like to bring up another poll. As a traveler, here's a question. As a traveler, what will make you feel confident when you have to make a trip to a business event again during this pandemic? As a traveler, what will make you feel confident when you have to make a trip to a business event again during the pandemic? And there are a couple of choices. The hotel venue seems safe enough and capable of coping with the sanitary requirements. The organizer has to make me feel confident with their plan. The government at the destination copes with the situation well enough. And if there will be too many people from too many countries, I am still not ready to go. And the last choice is I will not travel until I have been vaccinated properly. So ladies and gentlemen, do kindly vote. I'd also like our experts to share what they think about this question before we go ahead. So Richard from Malaysia.
Yeah, I think I will move closer to B, which is the organizer has to make me feel confident with their plan. Because to me, each customer is very different, their concerns are very different. And as long as the organizer are taking steps to add on to whatever SOPs the destination or the venue is already giving and secure my sense of well-being, then I will attend the event. So it would be B for me.
Kun Benjamin.
Yeah, look, I think this is it would be great if there's a multiple choice. I suppose I'm not trying to sit in the fence, but I think there's a combination of, similar to what Andrew mentioned, as even in Thailand, we've got different provinces, different districts, different areas that are opening up in different times, as well as we're a market that does depend a lot on international markets inbound. So a big part of that step will literally be Thailand doing the great job that they currently have in controlling the virus and giving that confidence out to other inbound markets, as well as uplift continues and airlines start to be able to fly in. That will be a big part. But I agree, and to Richard's point, I think it's important to have all of those systems in place, but to make sure we've got that humanised element and that soft touch, which hospitality is so well known for, because we still need to keep that element that's so important for meetings and events.
Andrew? And Andrew, what's your choice? Oh, we lost Andrew. I think there is a connection problem. Are you back? Are you able to reconnect with us, Andrew? Andrew is joining us from Australia. I think there's a bit of a problem there. Anyways, let me have a look at the poll results from the audience. Let me see what the audience has voted. Okay, so the audience says the government at the destination copes with the situation well enough. So they voted for this choice, 33%. Oh, Andrew, are you back with us?
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I disappeared for a second.
Never mind, you're back. Would you like to share your thoughts before we go ahead to the next question?
The only thing that I wanted to add outside of being the new standard is I think it's really important to get an insight into the sort of the corporate or the government travel policies and the policies around being allowed to attend. So sometimes it's not up to the individual traveller in a business events context. There could be other policies at play. I think there's a little bit of work that could be done in more sort of investigative work around surveying organisations around what those policies might look like, because I think they trump the. I know even I'm jumping out of my skin to attend an in-person event in the near future, but if I worked for an organisation, local government or other, I'd have to consider what I'm allowed to do as an employee. So I think I would love to see more research being done in that space.
I see. For me, I would choose more than one choice. I would say 1, 2, and 3. Everything. But I know it's a challenging time. If we can all work together collectively, I'm sure that we can win back customers' confidence and have them travel, and feel safe again. Reminding our audience that do send in your Q&As, because that's coming up in a short while. If you do have any questions about anything that you'd like our experts to share, please post it on the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen on your right. Actually, it's on my right, so hopefully it's on your right as well. Okay, moving along to our next question. Countries, especially in Asia, are now reopening. And we hear a lot about Green Lane and the so-called travel bubble, government-to-government collaboration, allowing people from low-risk areas to travel freely. And that's in the hope to revive the economies. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, some cities in China, South Korea, and Japan as well. But then again, people are still reluctant to travel. So I guess when it comes to the business in the events industry, to help bring people back, that would be something we must really do. So I'd like to ask Andrew this first question. How can we as business in the event sector help bring people back?
Well, I'd love to be able to promote on a country's record around safety. That would be fantastic. But as we all know, things can change very quickly. I think most countries are concerned about second waves. But at the end of the day, how your country has managed the COVID crisis, I think, is on record and on show for the rest of the world to see. And so that will be a big influencer. I mean, look at our neighbours down here in New Zealand. Their economy is 100% opened up because they have no COVID cases at this point in time. So domestically, they're just business as usual. In Australia, I was just checking the numbers this morning. In total, we've had 7,285 cases of COVID-19. A majority of those have recovered. We've only got 422 active cases remaining and a total of 102 deaths. So we're on the cusp of moving from suppression to elimination along the lines of New Zealand. We just need that kind of 2 weeks of clear run for us to be in that position. Now, then there's a lot of challenges around process around travel and opening up of borders and those sorts of things. and I guess that then has to be worked through in terms of what we can and can't do. But the travel bubble with New Zealand is certainly on the cards here. Industry is being very positive and assertive around pushing an opportunity. One that I've just seen recently is a connection between Wellington and here in Canberra, which is being pushed for, I think, next month in July. But as I mentioned before, we still need to be aware that some of our states' borders are closed in terms of being protecting their residents, and it would make it very hard to open up a connection with New Zealand before those state borders are 100% opened up. So I think the record on managing COVID-19 is an absolute opportunity that can be used moving forward in a global environment.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, what would you say to help bring people back, and also how to creatively and effectively communicate to clients in the efforts that we've invested to have them back on incentive trips?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to dispute the fact that people are reluctant to travel, because we've just relaxed our movement control order here in Malaysia just recently, a few days back. And looking at some of the reports, they are saying that the demand for hotel accommodation for Q3 and Q4 this year is on the increase. So there is a steady demand signaling confidence in recovery. So people are not hesitant to travel, but I think the leisure travelers will come first. Second wave of, I wouldn't say wave, the second group of people who might travel would be the business travelers. So to bring them back, I think we need to encourage people who are already traveling to see what we are already doing to safeguard their interests. And that hopefully that will translate to a earlier confidence for them to return in terms of business events.
There was a comment here by one of our audience, Jackie Gorman. Australians are very keen to travel. And he says leisure will come back first and then business events. No matter what, well, people want to travel again. That's true. Our next question to Kun Benjamin. How can we set a calm and relaxing tone so that business and incentive travelers feel confident to make the trip again? And how are hotels and planners working together at this point to tailor events as Thailand is now entering its fourth phase in the easing of lockdown restrictions?
Yeah, similar to the other panelists, we're looking forward to hopefully the announcement in a few hours as to what next level of restrictions will be, and need to give credit to the government and all the municipalities in Thailand for the work that they've been able to do to control the situation and keep numbers down to a minimum, as well as, you know, the resumption of the normal economy or the next few stages. I think there's always a delicate balance. I know normally I'm very keen to rush and get everything done very, very quickly, but we need to have a measured approach to ensure that we're maintaining the confidence of the bookers, of the last and final end clients, as well as all of the people around that, because we need to give them that confidence that what we have done, what we've set up and what we've implemented is in place. And I think that's a mixture of a number of things. So it's all about going out there, and as everyone's indicated, everyone does want to travel a lot. So many people have missed that level of social interaction, and having operated through the period as well, we have seen quite a quick rebound. We've got a lot of business still on the books in our hotels. That is, the customers and the clients have kept on extending that pass, and as soon as they are able to travel, they certainly will. And domestically, we've definitely seen that with some of the more leisure-driven destinations picking up very, very quickly, as well as some of those leisure destinations, they're traveling into the large cities as well, because everyone's keen to try to resume back to more normal and social interacted scenarios as quick as possible.
The next question I'd like to ask Richard. The general feeling of clients in your market, what have they indicated? You know, they're interested to travel and to organize events. You know, when is that looking like? Is it going to happen as people expect in the final quarter of this year, or is it in fact going to happen in 2021 when it comes to incentive travel?
I think everybody is just holding their breath. A lot of my corporate clients are actually reluctant to start their live events and moving on to virtual. Simple reason being that they do not want to be the reason for another cluster to appear. So nobody is willing to put their name at stake for this purpose. So for me, I would think that live events will probably only happen towards the end of this year, through quarter four and quarter one of next year.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, what are your thoughts? What's the general feeling of clients in Australia?
I guess firstly, some of the government restrictions, we just keep in mind, we are still a little bit behind Thailand and Southeast Asia. And so it hasn't been long since we've just been allowed to, in some states, invite more than 5 people to your home. So we're a little bit further behind. But having said that, with a lot of the intrastate travel being allowed, I think everyone's been sick of their homes and just busted out and gone into regional areas and really enjoyed themselves, and that's been good for some of the regional tourism areas to get a bit of revenue through the system again. I think across the course of the next few weeks, and we're already seeing in some states events of 100 or greater being allowed here, and so it's a softly intrastate kind of approach at this point in time, but we would see those things continue to be wound back. As I was talking before about getting a little bit more insight into the thinking of clients, and really keen to see some of the results of the polls, but we worked with Executive PA on a survey of some of their corporate event planners, and the responses was quite overwhelming, really. 80% of the EAs and PAs in these corporates are planning for an event of 100 or more across the next 12 months, and I think about 40% within the next 3 to 4 months. So I just think while there's a lot of doom and gloom, there is a lot of optimism, I think, in our industry. We are an in-person industry, and we're very excited, but there is that balancing of getting together and the risks that need to be offset in holding those activities. I think whether you're a corporate or an association, part of your thinking at this point in time would be what are the risks that we're exposed to or exposing others to. As we've said before, the safety and hygiene practices are removing those risks from a physical event perspective, but there's also some other risks that need to be considered around, insurance and possible outbreaks, as Richard mentioned as well. So all of that's been weighed up at this point in time, but I do think there's an absolute enthusiasm for things to get back to some sort of normality. But I suspect that group numbers will be smaller in the short term.
So is there a restriction of the capacity of people who can join events in Australia? Did you mention 100?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's a little bit different from state to state. I think we've had some great announcements coming out of Western Australia recently. I could be slightly incorrect, but forgive me if I am. I believe it's events of up to 300. And they've reduced the square metre rule, which we had a 4 square metre rule here in Australia, down to 2 square metres, which is all movements in the right direction. But other states are yet to sort of catch up to that speed. So I think it was fantastic to see all states and territories work together in making decisions about how to prevent COVID-19 spreading across the country. But now that we're in the opening phase, I think there's a bit of, what would you call it, a bit of competition between various destinations in Australia, and they're wanting to see the economy open up, and I guess in turn that means that they no longer have to continue to support various industry sectors as well. So it works both ways.
What about the case for Thailand and Benjamin in terms of gathering?
Yeah, look, the restrictions, they're not as fragmented as maybe the states in Australia are, but there are still some differences between different provinces and different regions. So Phuket versus the city versus other areas. But I think what we are seeing is very similar to everybody else. The restrictions are going case by case. The government and the regulators are taking a very measured response, but they're also doing that with great levels of consultation with agencies such as TSEB, which has done an amazing job, and TICA and the associations. So to make sure that as we do it, we're doing it in a measured response to then support the rejuvenation of the economy, but then also make sure. So at the moment, restaurants can open, small meetings can take place, meetings up to 200 can take place, but there currently is the requirement that it's all from a singular company or from a single business unit. So hopefully some of those restrictions will soon ease, because there's a large amount of social elements, even things like weddings. I've got over 25 weddings that I've got some eager people to be able to undertake for the rest of the year. A lot have had to even push them back. So that social element, you can't have everyone from a wedding from a single organisation. So these are areas that I think will start to relax, but definitely, further on in the year.
Let me read a comment here from our audience who believes that business will come back first due to the economic impacts that COVID-19 has caused globally. Business cannot stall anymore, or we then risk a global recession. There will be more risk mitigation at play, but we can already see governments arranging green lanes for business travelers and transits. From what I understand is that there'll be a discussion between Thailand and perhaps I think China and Japan on a possible travel bubble that can happen between our countries, especially from low-risk areas. So that's a good sign. Hope we see some really positive results that can help encourage people to travel more and to even make incentive trips. All right, so moving on to our next question. We would like to dig right down into the customer's experience. They are to travel amidst the pandemic. So how different will the experience be now? How can we make it pleasurable as possible, at the same time keeping everybody safe? So I'd like to break it down to 4 main areas when it comes to stay, to dine, to meet, and play. I'd like each of you to take us to each stage of the client's experience. Kun Benjamin, would you care to start?
Look, I think the accommodation and amenities under the stay component, that's relatively straightforward. Again, we made significant changes with a lot of areas such as throw rugs, cushions, pillows that can't easily be cleaned for each turnover of rooms. So we have elevated aspects of the cleanliness, and we have had to change some certain parts of the amenities. Some items are single use. I'm really trying to avoid that at our property so that we don't go back to bad practices on single-use plastics, single-use papers and so forth. So there are, plastic laminated or laminated items in the room that can easily be cleaned. So I think accommodation is quite straightforward, and the Accor All Safe program has some great protocols behind it. I think when we go through to dining, so we recently reopened our buffet about 2 weeks ago. We are running under restricted numbers with seating, with large seating allowances made in between seats and tables. So normally a restaurant that could take a few hundred now is limited to just under 100. But positively, and again, to speak to the signs of recovery, we're selling those lunches out every weekend, several days in advance. So that shows the hunger for people, no pun intended, to return back to dining experiences. I think everyone's a little bit over of takeaway delivery services. So I think restaurants will continue to do, and we have done that differently. So we call it a buffet, but there's a lot more handling, a lot more cooking on a la carte, a la mode sections. Our waiting staff and our kitchen team are cooking it fresh and then delivering it to the tables with all of the safety protocols. And again, in guidance with the Accor All Safe and Thailand's SHA requirements. Meetings and events, I think we've covered that off. There will be restrictions. Andrew mentioned guests per square meterage, whether it's 4 or 2 or 1 to 1.5 metre spacing in between seats. We took the time a few months ago to go through and run all of our floor plans with revised numbers. So, in cabaret setup through theatre and classroom, boardroom style, how all of those new configurations. And with that in mind, that's why we are starting to get some great early indications of groups coming forward, because people can see what we've done. They can see the new floor plans, and they do have the confidence with our property and the Accor All Safe and the SHA protocols that have been placed down. I think the last one's most probably the most challenging, the play and the entertainment, because I think, that's where there's a lot more interaction. There's a lot more human contact. So I think they're the elements. So things like team planning and team building, that might take some time to be able to understand how that can evolve. We've got a day spa in my hotel, how that's actually changing and moving forward, as well as social events, as we mentioned earlier, even a simple event that we've always held, weddings up to 300-400 people. How are we going to change the way that weddings and engagement ceremonies are held in the hotel, which it's not entertainment and play, but it is a very social gathering where people are mingling. Cocktail parties. I'm the president of the Australian Thai Chamber of Commerce. We've got a monthly event that we hold where we usually have 300 or 400 people, business networking events. How we do that moving forward is definitely going to be a challenge. But again, it's something that we do need to return back, as some of the questions have been. We do need to try to restart the economy because it definitely has been a challenging quarter.
Richard, please share your views.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about how the hotel is going to run because Ben is the expert, so I'll leave that to him. But I will look at it as an organizer and how we can actually make it a bit more pleasurable for people to come back. So if I look at it, I would think enhancing room service menus, getting special menus for my guests so that we can encourage them to dine in their room, seeing that now the capacity of your F&B outlets are now smaller, and we don't want them to go out of the hotel because that increases exposure. Instead of giving out your regular gift packs, we can give them branded mask or pocket sanitizers for them to use during their stay. So these are things that we can put into the rooms as a gift pack when they check in. In terms of the F&B outlets, my experience is when I go to F&B outlets right now, it looks very spaced out, very empty, definitely lacking in ambience. So I think there's a creative license for the hotel or even for my events to actually dress up, using this place to dress up with physical partitions that is decorated according to the themes. And this would definitely help to maintain social dynamics, energy and flow for the whole entire space. For the live events, I would think one of the main attractions of having a live event compared to a virtual one is that there's a lot of networking that's going to happen, and people miss that. So how do we encourage having all of this? Is to actually create event space. Say, for example, if you have a large conference of 1,000 people and your plenary hall cannot fit that 1,000 people due to space constraint, then we have everyone into different breakout rooms and using technology that we are using for virtual events, stream the plenary session to all 4 rooms at the same time. So what you are doing really is less crowd movement, less time wasted, and maximum usage of shrinking event space. Now, for entertainment and play, there are creative ways to encourage people, your guests, to adhere to social distancing efforts. I have some pictures that I would like to share with you on how that is. Give me a second, let me put that up.
Sure.
Oh, okay, I have been disabled. Yeah, the sharing has been disabled. So it doesn't matter, but what I'm saying is that for social distancing ideas, as an event organizer, we can actually creatively engage our guests when they come for the event. For example, doing tic-tac-toe kind of a flooring to space people out when they are doing their registration, for example. Creatively doing decorations in the space to create the distance for people, but still give them that celebratory kind of a feel to the event. So yeah, oh, okay, now I'm allowed to share the picture.
There it is.
Yeah, so you can see from this, I like especially this, where they wear the large Mexican hat to keep the social distancing. So it's kind of fun, and it creates a lot of engagement with people. You can even play games with the huge hat, I suppose. Yeah,
Seems
so
fun.
that's how I would look at it. All right, yeah, I will unshare now.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Andrew, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, look, as Ben mentioned, I think the accommodation side seems relatively straightforward, but I think there's opportunity for the most to be done there. I think as Richard even mentioned, the concept of in-room services, and not that the guest has never been the center of attention, but I think there'll be more personalization that takes place there, or opportunity for personalization from an accommodation perspective. And given the circumstances that, we're coming out of our shells, coming out of restrictions, there needs to be consideration that the guests may be needing to spend more time in their room, perhaps than they would have otherwise. Typically, when I've attended a conference before, the room was the least amount of usage that I had at the venue, and most of it was the external activities. But I think there needs to be a bit more consideration about perhaps work being done from the room, consideration around minibars. I don't think minibars in Australia is as lavish as those in Thailand, but I think that's something that might open up over time as well. Look, from a meeting and possibly even a dining perspective, using my old operations hat, I really do think that there's going to have to be a lot of creativity, as we just saw from those images, which I thought were quite great, around how do you convert a large space, which otherwise would have accompanied a lot of people, and move that into a space that can only probably accompany 50% of the attendees that otherwise would have been there. What do you do with that space in between around social distancing, and how do you make the room look attractive, let alone the physical logistics around people movement and those sorts of things? So I think there's possibly a bit more creativity that will occur in the floor layouts of dining rooms and banquets and seating for meetings. But what that looks like, I'm not sure. I'm not the absolute creative, but whether that means venues are working more with external parties to think around that creative design, or otherwise do that in-house, I'm not too sure. But I think they're areas that will change in the near future. But also, I guess we've been talking about virtual quite a bit. It's been around for a long time, but never more than now, as per this webinar even. And I think it's now becoming an essential part of running a meeting, where future events, international conventions, will simply have this as part of their basic offering moving forward. And that reluctance in the past perhaps to go virtual may become just normal moving forward. The good side of that is the potential for obviously increasing audiences and moving away from that fear that by having a virtual element will mean you'll have less delegates. I think will really open up to this being a compulsory part. The bit that we probably don't have our minds around is, as far as international meetings go, is the different time zones. I mean, I'm already attending a conference in July that's taking place in the US with a virtual component, and essentially at 9 a.m. there, I think it starts at 10 p.m. here. So there'll be some of those considerations that need to be made, but I think virtual will become just part and parcel of running a global meeting moving forward.
So we'll see more of hybrid formats, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that has been an interesting take from our industry experts on what business events customers will get traveling during the pandemic. And as we can see, all businesses are consistently transforming, adapting to the situation to ensure the highest level of COVID safety, while also ensuring that everyone will have a unique experience. Let's move on to Q&A. We have a few questions here from the audience. If you do have more, please feel free to send them in. Let me quickly proceed to our first question. With regards to all the new processes and methods brought in by the global chains, there appear to be only a short-term solution. They're all well and good while the hotels are running low occupancy, but what will be the impact on the cost for the owners? And how effectively will they be when occupancy begins to climb to higher levels? So I guess this question maybe from Benjamin can share with us.
Thanks, Kunali. Look, I think with relation to that, I wouldn't agree that it is a short-term solution. And I keep going back to the point that international standard and branded hotels have been running high levels of hygiene for decades and decades, and for a long time, and they've always been associated around that. I opened this hotel 5 years ago. We were HACCP certified within 12 months. So, these aspects will be here and elements will remain. increased levels of cleanliness might wind back. And I don't like using the words new normal or old normal. I think we're just running higher levels of what we require to deliver the business at the moment. And as they slowly start to dissipate off, we'll naturally see that. I don't disagree, and Andrew hit the point really well at the opening of the event, that there will be a balance of who bears the cost. You know, I've had some reasonably significant capital expense that I have had to purchase operating through this period. So things like digital thermometers, looking at if we're going to do the camera guided thermal imaging for guests moving through. We're the largest Novotel conference hotel in Bangkok. I've got a rooftop bar, so on any given day in high occupancies, we can have thousands of people at the hotel. So areas like that to be able to help mass movement of people will be a cost. And unfortunately, that's a cost burden that would go into the hotel's operations or a capital expenditure. I think when we look towards an ongoing cost, there will be a balance. I think there is an element that we may not be able to provide events as cheaply as we have in the past. Thailand's always been known for incredible value. I think that value will continue. However, there will be elements we do look at. And I think to Richard's point, it gives us also a great avenue that if we've got a corporate event or a client event, we can personalize and add a level of touch points to this. And that would be a cost that I think fairly would most probably sit with the organisers. But again, hotels, like always, will be able to create that as a value add package or an element in the normal level of negotiation. So yes, I am mindful of the cost, but definitely at the end of the day, we're here to make business. We're here to make business work. And hoteliers are great at finding that balance and closing business.
I see. Next question for Richard. Will planners contribute financially towards creating ambience?
I would share what Ben just said, that some of these additional decorations or ambience settings, the cost of that will definitely go back to the organizer and therefore transfer back to our customers. But what we do, how we sell to the customer is that it is an added value. We tell them that this will add on to the ambience of the event, the experience for the audience. And therefore, it's really how we skin the cat, how we actually sell to our customers and tell them that this is a cost that they should be paying for. Whereas standard operating procedures that the hotels and venues are already setting up, I think is sufficient. And definitely, like Ben said, it will go back to the hotel, definitely. But for events, any additional setting or decorations definitely have to come back to the organizers.
Kun Ben, how will COVID impact the future of hotel designs? Will hotels still be interested in meetings and events?
Great question, thank you. Look, this is a pretty big conversation to have. There's really two clear minds. There's a large amount from a design firm, and I was only speaking to a partner that we use that does design hotels. Part of my role, I'm literally opening a new Ibis Styles in Ceylon in the next few months, and it does have conferencing facilities. Some venues are choosing to redesign. They have used this as a period to renovate or enhance their particular areas. So there will be some changes in the way that we are doing that. And in future, there might be some hotel designs that have been modified slightly. However, at the end of the day, I feel, and this is my personal opinion, but I feel that eventually we will go back to a level of complete normality. Events will go back to full capacity. People will be side by side, and the time frame we can't deliver. So I think there is a reluctancy to completely modify and renovate areas because, as Richard mentioned as well, we do want to create that intimate space. We do want to return back to the social aspects of conferencing that we've always had. I love meetings and events. It's been a big part of me since I started in hotels and working through, and I love working in hotels with big meetings and events, and I think there'll always be a massive interest. It's a key driver of revenue in hotels, and it adds such a wonderful touch to any busy hotel. You're showcasing the best of food and beverage, the best of your facilities, as well as really doing what hoteliers do best, and that's welcoming guests and making them feel great.
Our next question is for Andrew. What's the preparation for travel bubble that Australia and New Zealand are doing? What's the pros and cons from your point of view?
Yeah, so at this stage, as I mentioned before, the cons are our ability through our state borders being closed, or some state borders being closed. There is some discussion around still direct travel between New Zealand and those states regardless, but I personally don't see that working very well unless all of the country is open. So those conversations are happening at the moment. There are some of the tourism industry bodies that are being very proactive in this space, establishing a restart timeframe and lobbying government, because I guess there's a lot involved in airlines and travel between countries opening up again that needs to take place. There's that whole consideration around customs and visas and border protection to some degree. So there's a lot of back end processes that need to be understood, and that will take some time. But we do need our airlines to be healthy. So when we're ready to go from a business events perspective, we've got two major airlines in Australia. Unfortunately, one of those has gone into voluntary administration, and just by having a single carrier here in Australia is not a good outcome. So we need both airlines in a position to be up in the air, doing what they do, moving people around. And that's really critical for us, because we don't want to see spike in prices to be able to get from one destination to another. We want to see access to not just our capital cities, but our key regional destinations like Cairns in the Great Barrier Reef, Gold Coast, all across Australia. We want to see access return as it was. So I think the health of our airline industry is just as critical, and part of that New Zealand opportunity is just that growth on that scenario.
Mm. A lot of crisis management actions are being taken currently. The question is, will we see the old normal returning? I guess this question, all of you can share your views. Richard?
I do not think that it's going to be business as normal. It will not be, because there's a raised awareness of hygiene in public places. And as long as we feel we are not protected because there's no available vaccine, or even if there is an available vaccine, we never know what is the next virus coming out, there will be that request by clients to make sure that certain SOPs are adhered to ensure the safety of the audience.
So it's just a psychological impact that will last. I totally understand what you mean. Kun Benjamin?
Yeah, as I mentioned, new normal and old normal, I think we've got a lot of terms that have been branded out recently, and I'm not a fan of many of them. I think there will be an element that will always remain, but I keep going back to people have chosen large-scale, international, professionally run hotels and meeting events for a long time with that level of confidence. This has touched everybody in the world, this current situation, but from what I'm seeing in the early signs as the restrictions are eased, I do think and definitely hope that at one point in the future, we will always have those high levels of hygienes in place, but hopefully we can resume back to effectively how we've always done meetings and events. The time frame is the most difficult one to plan on.
Andrew?
Look, I hope so, that we can get back to some form of how things were. We just did a study at the end of last year that showed the business events industry contributed $35 billion to the Australian economy. It's a huge opportunity for Australia, but it's not just on the visitor economy side. There's also all of the magical trade and investment opportunities, the knowledge transfer, the innovation that comes out of people coming together in person that just doesn't happen in a virtual space. So I really hope that we can get back to that same level again. Employing 229,000 people in Australia in the business event sector, really key components. I actually just again, coming back to that data nerd, I ran a little report on some information that we collect. We actually collect the bidding information of the Convention Bureau across the country to get some insights again around the work that they do. And amazingly, I ran a little report on the business that convention bureaus placed by venue type, and importantly, up until the end of December in 2019, the biggest growth area was the hotel sector from a venue perspective, where business placed in hotels grew by 26% across the year on year. And amazingly, the biggest organisation type was the corporate sector, with 54% growth in hotels. So if we can get back to some sort of sense of normality, it means business for everyone, which we really have to strive for. But I do think what Richard mentioned before, there is something we need to consider, which is pre-vaccine and post-vaccine perhaps, and we don't even know if a vaccine can be found, so we have to keep that in mind. But if a vaccine can be found within the next 12 months, I think there will be a dramatic shift post that time, and we'll have to continue to adapt and live within a particular type of means and additional safety and hygiene protocols across that period. But we have to be prepared that might not occur as well. So yeah.
Okay. Next question. How are hotels managing travelers who have bad behavior around buffet? If they become unruly, our clients may ask us, that is event agencies, to remove our groups from their hotel immediately. So who wants to go first?
Yeah, look, I have a funny feeling I'll kick that off. So look, we've now been managing buffets. We've now been managing buffets for several weeks. As I've mentioned, we operated through the entire situation, and we'll continue to do so. The best thing, or one of the best things, is that everybody has a massive amount of awareness of the current situation. There's a massive amount of mutual respect. You will always have challenging guests. That's a part of our job and has been a part of my job for 20 years. How you manage them is how you manage them. But I do think there is a level of education that will need to be done. There could be some barriers with different guests. We're a multinational hotel. We have guests from all around the world, and as business resumes, we will continue to welcome them from all around the world. But at the end of the day, that's the hotelier's job, to politely talk to somebody. Please ask them to revert as to how they should and how they manage. And look, in the event, like no different, you manage everything on a case-by-case basis, but I don't see it becoming a large-scale issue. And when I see how my amazing team of artists at the hotel have rebounded in such a challenging situation in resumption of buffets and how we manage it all, they do it all with in their stride. They know what to do. They know how to manage it. And again, at the end of the day, we are hoteliers, we are hospitality people, and it's what we do, live and breathe every day.
Richard, would you like to share your views on this?
I've been in the event industry for 25 years, so I've dealt with all kinds of guests. But what I normally do as an organizer when I'm approached by the hotel on unruly behavior is to go back to the organizer and get the organizer to speak with their guests. Because then it comes across as an owner of the event to manage their audience instead of us going to them and being accused of being rude. Yeah, so we don't want the tables to be turned on us. We push that task back to our clients, and they will have to take care of that. And normally it works because they know that they have to follow rules. And just like Ben says, everybody has a respect for what's happening right now. And I think it's a general understanding that we have to abide by rules for the safety of everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. Next question for Andrew. Any short-term sales tactics recommendation if we want to bring business back as quick as possible, as businesses do need cash to get through at this point?
Yeah, it probably comes back to what I mentioned earlier, and I think it related to one of the earlier polls around just being able to have that lead time. There is a time that's required to plan an event, but not only to plan an event, to market that event and get attendees. If it's an in-house corporate activity, then that's probably a slightly different matter and can be turned around much more quickly. But again, being a little bit biased, I would definitely work with your convention bureau. As I mentioned before, there's a pipeline of activity that they're working on. They're working on those postponements with the venues and the clients as the intermediary in many cases, and there's business that's currently already there. It's just a matter of whether the the client has the time and the confidence to be able to run their event in the near future. So I guess in essence, there's quite a bit of business out there, but it just comes back to whether that can be switched on in the short term that's required. We certainly know that there'll be issues when those properties that have been closed, they open up. They're not going to get to 100% occupancy straight away, and particularly from the events perspective, that's not going to happen. But we need to work together, I guess, right across the whole board, the supply chain, the client side, the bureaus in the bidding process, to get back up and running as soon as possible. Because in the absence of business returning, governments are pressured to provide more, wage savings and other forms of compensation. And I'm sure that's the last thing they want to do, spend money that they don't have in bailing us out of this circumstance. So I think we all need to work together to get things happening as quickly as we can.
Gentlemen, if you'd like to add on, please do. Any short-term sales tactics? If so, I'd move on to our next question.
I completely agree with Andrew. It's going to be collaborative. It's so critical, and we always have done, and we will continue to, but it's even more important working with all government bodies, national agencies, tourism associations, third party, because we all need the business to return as quick as possible. And I think also, to Richard's point, using the expertise of organisers, I think will continue to grow. And I think that is maybe a potential, hopefully some green scenario from this, that people will want to use the creativity, definitely in the short to medium term. And hopefully it opens up the opportunity for more people to understand that if there is a cost associated with those organisers, the real value that they bring, because they bring an amazing amount of experience to pulling off events. We've got great teams at hotels, but I just keep on circling back that it's a team effort, and you need to work really, really closely with inbound and outbound organisations as well as professionals.
How has the cost structure and pricing model of event organisers and agencies changed? Richard?
I guess that comes to me. Okay. Yeah. With my experience with the corporate clients right now, a lot of their budgets have been slashed, at least down by 50 to 60%. And that means that budgets for events, whether it's live events or virtual that we're running right now, is running at an all-time low. And the change would be to be very basic, to offer what is basic, and to add on value add items as an optional item. That's number one. Number two is that if we were to do live events, and we are actually running some live events, hopefully by the third quarter. And what this happened, how we actually charge them would be based on additional hygiene factors that needs to be put in, like for example the creative sections that we need to add on. That definitely we have to transfer back to the customer, and that's the change there basically. But everything is worked on a very conservative manner because we need to understand that everybody has a bottom line.
Mm-hmm. So how can hotels and venues price accordingly? It's a related question. So we all can make a profit. Hotels and venues, so how can you price accordingly with the situation? Benjamin?
Look, I keep going back. There will be some increased costs. There's always increased costs. Levies, government levies, taxes, air uplift, if I'm honest, would be one of my primary concerns. And I don't like anything I can't control. And I can't control the price of air tickets as they move forward. I heard this morning on Triple J that Qantas is going to start resuming seating and increasing their domestic flights at the moment, running through, and they're not going to have the third seat removed out of their domestic flights. Masks will be optional but not mandatory. So look, I think there will be some costs associated, but when we get back to the question of hotels, it's always going to be that balance. Definitely, I'd be lying if I'm saying the profitability of meetings and events isn't up for a little bit of a challenge with the reduced capacities that we can hold. It definitely is a scale business in many instances. When you remove at that boutique and high end, you've got a lot more margins involved, but when you're doing large scale events, it's definitely a capacity number. So, whether it's going to be a mixture of these hybrid virtual events, how you're managing it, but look, unfortunately, there is a reduction in the amount of meetings and events we will have for the short, medium term. I've got 11 meeting rooms. So as one of our other panelists mentioned earlier, it might mean that a normal event that might have only used one meeting room might use 6, because we are using breakout rooms consecutively, where previously I wouldn't have had that availability. So I think we can manage it. And as restrictions ease, I can assure you we'll still do it in a measured response that's with safety and guest comfort at front of mind. But as soon as we can start turning up margins, we definitely will. But there will be some slight cost increases, I would imagine, across some aspects of doing groups.
Andrew, can you share with us what's the common key focus in the recovery plans of Australian CBBs in the next 6 to 12 months, and any particular interesting ideas you have seen so far?
So I think first and foremost is comes back to what I mentioned before around that lead time of being able to open up and accept business. If we miss the next high season, we'll certainly be lobbying for an extension of what we call our JobKeeper program, which is a wage subsidy scheme put forward by the government. And given that the tourism and business events sectors have been hardest hit, we may be eligible for an extension in some way, shape or form of that scheme beyond its shut-off timeline, which is scheduled for the end of September. So we have to think about the health of our industry. The focus here in Australia has really been about keeping people employed, and not so much around making a profit, but having the doors open so that you can turn a coin that you can then pay staff to exist until we can get to the other side. So that's probably the first area that we'll be assessing quite strongly. And I know governments typically don't allow you to have everything that you ask for, and you have to eventually prioritise and look, from our perspective, that would have to be a priority if we needed to turn to that. I think also the health of the client side, again, as I've been mentioning earlier, is something that needs to be considered, and also looking at what elements of risk they're exposed to. So I think catalyst funds that can assist event organisers pay for deposits, given that they may have already had difficulties in postponing or cancelling events across the last little period, to encourage that activity to happen in the near future across the next 12 months. I think a catalyst fund to stimulate demand would be a great thing, because not only, particularly if you're looking at the association sector, not only does an event trickle down funds through the destination, through the various supply chain elements, it also provides revenue for the organisation. We want organisations to continue to exist and survive beyond the COVID-19 crisis, because without the clients, we have no industry to run. So I think those are the two key focuses at this point in time, making sure we look after our industry, but also trying to stimulate demand when it's safe to do so.
Next question for Richard. According to a poll, people tend to look towards the government for much needed trust. As a planner, do you think CBBs should keep up their games better in terms of gaining clients' trust?
A simple yes. Any sort of reassurance from authorities, whether it's government or non-governmental, definitely will help to boost confidence of customers to want to visit that destination, to want to go there to run their events or to garner some experience from it. So definitely yes.
Anything specific you'd like to see from Thailand?
But I think Thailand is doing a fantastic job at this moment.
All right. Andrew, would you also like to share any thoughts on this, Andrew?
Look, I think communication is the key, and that's where bureaus come into play, and various other state authorities, is making sure that the information is clear and understood about what the situation is on the ground in that destination. As I said, it's probably a little bit complicated right here and now across the country with the different rules and procedures that are being allowed, but that's because things are moving so quickly. I think those destinations that can provide the best and clearest communication, also that very personalised touch to those clients as well. Really delivering on what the client needs, I think, is going to be the absolute centerpiece moving forward. And so aligning whether it's your product as a venue or your destination to the needs of that client, I think will be critical like never before. So I think that's my contribution to that. Yeah.
Ben, how are you managing social distancing versus pricing? And is this becoming cost prohibitive?
Look, there are some aspects of conferencing and events that will be a little bit more difficult, but at the end of the day, we do need to resume as much revenue generation as we can. I think in talking with a lot of our partners recently, there'll always be exceptions, but most people are not taking advantage of this situation and not really aggressively pushing price down. There's a few questions along the lines of price dumping or cost dumping. I don't think that really helps anyone as an industry, and I don't think it helps anyone at all, because at the end of the day, when you dramatically reduce your cost to try to stimulate business, somebody has to foot the bill, and it has been a very difficult last quarter. So I think there needs to be a very careful, and I think as an industry, we do need to show some levels of leadership in that regard, because what is an individual person's decision or an individual business unit's decision can have wide sparking impacts across the entire industry. You know, we've got a lot of hotels in Thailand and in all regions, and it's really, really important. So I think when we go back to social distancing versus pricing, I know I say it a lot, but it is that balance. It is negotiating with the clients. But again, it's about being creative. We've got a lot more facilities. Do you do the event outside? Do you activate? And I've been doing it for a long time in my properties. You don't use your traditional convention center, conference center and facilities just to have events. You can have a meal break in the driveway. You can have a meal break around the area, around the swimming pool, in the gym, in the kids club. You know, definitely hygiene principles will make that a little bit more challenging than we have in the past. But again, you know, this is what my team of professionals do. We do maintain cleanliness and we do continue through, but there will be a little bit more pressure for sure.
Richard, will client increase budget for their program post-pandemic?
No. we know the answer to this. It's no. They give you a budget and you work with it. I think what we need to expect is that if we can justify the expenditure, the additional expenditure, and if it means that their audience will be safe, their objectives will be met, yes, they will increase, but not exponentially. I think we still need to be very conservative with this regard.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yeah,
now
look, just on that point, I think that's a really important point to circle back to. I think if hotels start applying cost increases because of COVID or because of new situations, I don't think that's going to be accepted very well. But to Richard's point, I think if you're showing the value behind it, whether it's an increase in what you're offering, whether it's a benefit that's being given back, or whether it's a peace of mind to a multinational or an international company, I think there is always the ability to communicate with those organisers and explain what it is. Cost adding for cost's sake is never going to work, but if you're explaining it and have great relationships, you're always going to be able to find that middle ground and get some extra costs added back. But there is no doubt, particularly with the additional airlift, uplift cost and some other areas, there will be some challenges with budgets being cut. But at the end of the day, we've already seen people do want to have these events, groups do want to happen. They will be hybrid, but you can't have every single event in a webinar or on a Zoom call. You do need to resume back to this because businesses do need to resume back and hold meetings and events.
mm-hmm.
The only part that I'll probably add, coming back to that that hybrid virtual component, is that I think hotels and venues will probably have to start to look at whether that's packaged or part of the standard package, if that makes sense. So I know that model has changed depending on the hotel structure or the venue structure around what's on sold. But I think a lot of technology will now have to become part and parcel of the basic package. And so considerations about whether you outsource or have that in-house, all of those I think are up for grabs for decisions in the near future.
Let's talk about the darker side of things, a possible nightmare. The second wave of COVID-19, which we're already seeing some news in the United States, international business events could go darker for much longer. So can our industry really rely exclusively on domestic markets? In that case, how can we brace for impact? And Ben?
Thanks for giving this one to me. Look, I won't deny we don't have the same domestic volume that maybe a country like Australia does have. But I definitely wouldn't say that it's all doom and gloom. We are the largest inbound market in the world is Bangkok. We were on the well way to having 40 million inbound visitors last year, and I think it still finished out at almost 38 or 39.5 million. So if there are second waves or if there are challenges moving forward, there will be added pressure. But on the flip side, we still have a massive international and multinational business network in Thailand. So yes, the groups may not be as large, they may not have some overseas delegates, and that's where this hybrid model will definitely work, where CEOs might dial in, ex-coms might be dialing in, but the local offices, the local events still will continue to happen. And as long as all of us are using elements like a Cause All Safe program, we keep on showing the confidence that we have in delivering this higher level of hygiene, higher level of procedures training, national national standards like the SHA that we've got in Thailand, and I'm sure all large countries are implementing their own safety measures and certification around that. I think we're going to manage it, but yes, there will be challenges with a market that does have large inbound volumes in, and it's not only an issue for Thailand, it will be an issue for some other, but you know, this hasn't happened overnight. I can assure you the amount of planning and work that's being done with large-scale hotel companies and groups hasn't stopped. And we're a resilient bunch of people, and we've been through, unfortunately, crises in the past. So we will find out how to manage and navigate that through, but it's just another challenge that we'll need to take in our stride.
What about Malaysia?
I would think that I look at it a bit more positive. I won't look at it so gloomily, because I think with the first wave, we sort of have everything in place. We are ready for whatever comes. And with the travel bubble that we were talking about just now, I think we can restrict travelers from safe countries so that we can help each other and support each other as a region. And I think that in that case, business can still be forthcoming. It may not be as good as before, but at least then we are able to sustain ourselves.
Andrew?
As Benjamin alluded to, I think we're quite fortunate that we have a very big domestic market here in Australia, and that's probably also because of our geographic location being the second last stop on the end of the line other than New Zealand, from the North American, Asian and European markets to some degree. So a lot of the bread and butter revenue from venues and suppliers is made out of the domestic market. And so I think, you know, putting that to one side, a second wave would be absolutely devastating. I think we've done such a good job to get to this point that for us, we can only see things opening up more and more. But as you're probably aware, the biggest debate that's happening here at the moment is with regard to the recent Black Lives Matter protests that occurred across most cities in Australia. And while the content of that emotional protest is really, really important here, the timing is couldn't be any worse, I guess, given that we've hit the records that we have. So if there are any outbreaks that occur, it will lead to a second wave of some scenario, I would imagine. But on the flip side, if there is no outbreak from any of those mass gathering activities, then maybe we can turn that into a positive in that we have done such a good job. The scenario of community transmission, or the risk around community transmission, is very low, and therefore there's an opportunity for business events to open up more swiftly. But look, you know, the international market, while we are so far away from the rest of the world, is key for us as a country. I think we heavily rely on trade, and business events are a key component for Australia tapping into export markets. We need to learn from the world's best, and by hosting them in our country is a way to do that. So it is a very important focus for Australia to continue to do well in the international marketplace. We just had the results, I guess. Interesting to see pre-COVID-19 that Australia just moved up to 12th place in the world in the ICA rankings, which is a fantastic result for us, with Sydney moving to 20th. And we continue to bid for and attract those large corporate incentives out of Asia. They're really important for us and showcasing our wonderful country. So while the domestic market is a huge opportunity, we certainly wouldn't want to lose that opportunity of the international client.
We have a couple of minutes left. Let's end it on the brighter side of things. Perhaps you would like to leave some message of encouragement to our audience, and to actually share your personal views. You know, what have we learned from this crisis, and what makes you think that our industry has proven resilient so far? So this last question is for all of you. Richard?
Okay. I think if there's anything that I've learned through this whole entire episode is to be very positive, to look forward to the next step, use our creativity that we have that we normally do for our projects, and use that to sustain our business, to build the next step. I think that is very important, and that is something that I've learned. The next thing is also collaboration with partners or people that you never thought you would collaborate with, but we have done that, and I think doing that has given us a lot of leeway in terms of business development. And and I think these are the two key areas that I've actually learned, and I think that's the way to go.
Benjamin?
Yeah, look, we're a resilient group of people. We have hospitality is in the DNA of all of our teams. And that's something that is really, really important for us to never forget. We add a human touch to everything we do, and I think that's not important. It's really important to continue and maintain that, because we have gone through some pretty significant challenges in the last few months. I think there's a good level of optimism with the green lanes or travel bubbles that we'll continue to run through. And, you know, some of our key feeder markets for Thailand do and have controlled the current situation quite well. So we are, quietly optimistic about the amount of business that then can start following in. And we wait for bated breath for local restrictions to continue to ease. Not too fast to the point that it creates a level of uncertainty in the market, but fast enough that we can get back to having groups and events back. So I think that it's a mixture of a lot of things. What we've learned from this current situation, look, it has been unique in many, many different ways, and we've never seen, or certainly in my time, and we've never seen such a large-scale situation cascade across the entire world so quickly and for such a prolonged period. But again, you know, it can only make us stronger, makes us more resilient, and it allows us the ability to then work on those new normals. And I keep going back to, we need to continue to give the confidence to our guests, to our customers, and to our clients that we will deliver a safe and measured with a great level of experience. And I think we will continue to do so. And we just need to look ahead for the positives.
Andrew?
How does that saying go? Never waste a crisis, I think. We talk a lot about the legacies of business events. I think we need to think about the legacy of COVID-19 on the world. And I think to some degree, it has challenged every single business model out there and every single business relationship that exists. And so with success typically comes complacency. And I think as the global travel market has exponentially grown over recent years, and we've all been the winners out of that growth, I think with the global shutdown now, we really have to rethink how we do business and not waste that opportunity. So I think looking forward and being optimistic, we would hope that there would be better business practices that come out of this, better relationships, and better business. So yeah, don't waste this opportunity.
All right, from today's talk, we know that there will be challenges, concerns until there's a vaccine for the virus, but people are getting used to life under the new normal. I, for one, am getting used to this, but I see business, business events, hospitality sectors are working together to gain trust from health-conscious customers with all the hygiene standards currently implemented. And what I know is that the power of human connection is irreplaceable. So travelers, incentive travelers will soon return. That's it for the Q&A. And if there are remaining questions, it'll be sent to our speakers who will be answering them for you. And that will be posted in the Facebook page later. So do stay tuned for that. Thanks to our audience for participating, and also thanks to our speakers for their insights. Do stay tuned for the next series, our webinar series from Site Thailand. You can follow Site Thailand's Facebook fan page for more information. And before we say goodbye today, I'd also like to request our audience, all of you out there, to kindly help evaluate today's webinar. Do scan the QR code, which in a few moments will be shown onto the screen. We would appreciate your thoughts on that. On behalf of Site Thailand, Tika, TSEB, I'd like to once again say a big thank you to our speakers, to Richard, Kun Benjamin, and also Andrew for being here with us. Thanks to our viewers once again. Please do stay safe, stay healthy, stay hopeful. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. I'm Cholapansan Rula. See you next time. Sawadee ka.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.